Alright, I am back with another video, and today we are doing probably one of the most highly requested videos, I guess. I suppose it is a build, but it's more of a video concept thingy. You'll see what I mean. I've been asked a lot of times for my take on how I would complete the achievement Jack of all trades, which basically says that you have to level up once in every single class without respecking with withers. So that would mean basically by the end of the game you would have a 1 level dip in every single class, because there's 12 classes and only 12 levels available to us. Now, I initially held off doing this because I'm like, well, I'm sure hundreds of YouTubers have probably already made very detailed and interesting guides on how to do this. I wasn't really sure what else I could add to the conversation, but I thought, you know what, just because I keep getting requests for it, I'll satisfy the kind of requirement, the desire for this type of video. So here we are. But I thought I'd put my own unique spin on it, because everybody can just say, oh yeah, take levels in this, take levels in that, do whatever you need to optimize this as much as you can. I actually wanted to come up with a reason a character would do this. Like, what kind of backstory / motivation would bring someone to take one class in every stat? And I think I've got it. I think this character would probably be someone who, at some point in their life, had something very important ripped away from them. Whether it would be a family member, a close friend, you know, a loved one, perhaps even their own children, I don't know. Something extremely important to them that would send them into such a mad spiral that they would attempt to obtain power in every possible way. Stealing, making pacts with demons, praying to the gods, making deals with, you know, dragons, studying sorcery for ages, learning fighting. They would do everything, the musical arts, go live out in the woods. They would do every single thing they could to obtain as much power as they can, but in doing so, in spreading their knowledge and what their body is capable of so thinly that they can't actually manifest a large amount of power in any of it. In their mad scramble to gain this power to achieve their goals, in the end they could do nothing. And I think that is a tragedy within itself. However, an opportunity arose, and it's not something most people would see as an opportunity, but it came about nonetheless. The tadpole. Because here's the thing, with all of this knowledge that they can't really grasp or develop upon, all this power that they've accumulated in small, minuscule specks, the tadpole is consistent. Because no matter what classes you level up in what order, you're never going to be able to get their full potential because you're stuck at level 1. But the illithid powers, they remain consistent. And I believe if that potential for power existed, this character would absolutely take it. So this is what this build is today. I wanted to create a build that utilizes this concept in a thematic way, taking power from both the tadpole and other sources in order to create a decent playstyle that will get you through the game. Now, I think most people would say, you know, obviously if you're doing this achievement, just do it on, what's it called, balanced mode, because obviously you're not going to have as tough of a time. But this build, I actually think, is tactician ready. I think what you'll get out of this build is enough to do tactician, and you have to remember, you only need to achieve this on one character. In reality, you could play through the game completely normally, have a character in camp that you just don't level up, and then when you reach level 12, just level them up 1 in every stat and you get the achievement. But that's not how we do things here. We actually want to play this character that is going to be taking these levels and everything, so let me show you how to do it. First up, we're going to be starting off as a rogue. Now, hear me out. A lot of people, I think, would want to start off as a fighter. Constitution saving throw proficiency. Every single armor and weapon in the game, it makes sense, but because of the strategy I'm going for, I don't actually care that much about those proficiencies. We're going to get them regardless. By the end of this build, you're going to have all of those proficiencies anyway, so it's not really going to matter, aside from maybe Constitution saving throws. But let's be honest, what are we really concentrating on with this build? realistically. So I actually think that skill proficiencies, especially in the early game, are much more important, because as much as this build is going to be able to be capable in combat, you kind of want those skill proficiencies more because you'll be able to talk your way out of things. And as such, the best way to get through this unscathed is to just not fight at all. But when you need to, you will be able to. So let's start off with Rogue. This is going to get a sneak attack, which we will actually be able to get a little bit of damage out of, because we will be using finesse weapons with this build. But sneak attack is going to be staying at its basic 1d6 extra damage because, well, we're not going to be taking any more levels in it. As for our starting ability scores, I've gone with an 8 in strength because we don't need it, a 10 in dexterity. Now I know we can't respec here, and yes, we are using the gloves of dexterity to push this up to an 18. But the thing is with this strategy I'm going to be showing off in a minute, you're not actually going to need high dexterity right at the very start. And since the gloves of dexterity are obtained in Act 1, once you've kind of done the Druid Grove questline, you can basically go straight and get them. But again, you're not actually going to need any sort of dexterity until a bit later on, because you'll just be able to wear armor or something like that. This build is not going to be in the front line of combat, especially at the start, but you'll kind of see what I mean as we get through. It's a bit hard to explain, but this low dexterity score at the beginning is not going to make or break your game. Trust me. Constitution is 16 because I do want to have at least a decent Constitution score because I want a decent chunk of HP. Intelligence at 8, we don't need it, but we can use the Warped Headband of Intellect to bump it up if we need to do skill proficiency checks. But, spoiler alert, Wizard is not going to be something we grab early, so Intelligence is not needed. Wisdom at 14, I think this is just great for saving throws, and just in general, it will work out quite nicely. And since a lot of these classes we're going to be taking a bit earlier on actually do use Wisdom, it makes sense to have it. And Charisma at 17, we are going to be using Ethel's Boon to push this up to an 18. This is going to give us a well-rounded set of stats, and Charisma is going to be our main spellcasting modifier. As for our skill proficiencies, I went with the Urchin background, giving us Sleight of Hand and Stealth, and I've also decided to take Deception, Intimidation and Persuasion, putting our expertise into Deception and Persuasion, although I can see you taking it out of Deception and putting it into Stealth or Sleight of Hand, but that's entirely up to you, and I've left our final ability score in Perception. This is just going to give us a very well-rounded set of skills. These ability scores here are going to make it so we can talk our way out of a lot of situations. Perfect for the early game especially. Right off the bat from level 2, we're going to be taking our first multi-class, as you already expected, and we're actually going to be able to start our main strategy here. Warlock. Now, yes, this is an Eldritch Blast build, because it makes sense. We get Eldritch Blast at level 1. Now, obviously we can't get Agonizing or Repelling Blast, because they come from level 2 of Warlock. However, we are going to be able to augment Eldritch Blast in a lot of ways that it's going to make it very, very powerful. Between the equipment we use and the illithid powers, it's going to become very strong. So we're going to be picking up Eldritch Blast to start. And I would also pick up Friends at this point as well. Getting advantage on those charisma checks is really going to help. And I forgot to mention it at the start, but we are playing a Duergar for this build. You have a few options here though. You can play a Githyanki for Astral Knowledge, a Gnome for the advantage on mental saving throws, and advantage on stealth if you play Deep Gnome, but I quite like Duergar here for a few reasons, namely, basically being able to be permanently invisible. For those of you that haven't seen my other builds that feature Duergar gained this really unique version of invisibility that has no spell slot cost, has no short rest or long rest requirement, so it basically allows you to be invisible pretty much all the time while out of combat, basically allowing you to skip a lot of encounters, being able to kind of gamify a lot of situations and sneak into places to get things that you wouldn't normally be able to. Stuff like that. And I think that invisibility would come really, really handy if you are doing a higher level playthrough with this strategy. I mean, if you're going to try this on honor mode, good luck. But it could definitely work. And I'm trying to kind of take honor mode into consideration for this because I actually feel like it might be an interesting challenge to give it a go, but I digress. So yeah, I would personally pick Duergar, but there are tons of other options. This build isn't 100% race dependent, so you can choose whatever you like, but I'm personally going with Duergar. Next up, our subclass, and I want Great Old One. Again, this is kind of an illithid power build, and I feel like this person, the first thing they would have done to obtain whatever scrap of power they could was try and pray to some try and make a pact with some old Like maybe they would have tried everything. They would have tried the Fiends, they would have tried the Archfays, but none of them would have listened. But I think they would have unconsciously managed to absorb some power from a Great Old One. Even the Great Old One itself isn't really aware of it, but they managed to get some power, and I think that ties into the illicit aspect. But the main reason I want it, Mortal Reminder. When you land a critical hit, against a creature, that creature and any nearby enemies must succeed a wisdom save or become frightened until the end of their next turn. This build is going to be able to get a lot of critical hits. So overall, this really helps us out being able to spread those status conditions. We also are going to be able to get our hands onto different spells, and I'm going to be picking some fairly easy ones. Hex is essentially just going to allow us to do a little bit of extra damage, and Hellish Rebuke is going to give us a reaction-based attack. Armour of Agathis is there, but we're going to be getting that a different way in just a minute. Speaking of that, we're getting it now, because our next multi-class is going to be into Sorcerer. Sorcerer is going to give us a lot of things that I want for this build, namely Draconic Bloodline. This is going to give us unarmored defenses if we were casting Mage Armour, but we don't actually need to. We're also going to get to pick our Dragon Ancestor, and I'm going to pick a White Dragon for Armour of Agathis, allowing us to gain 5 temporary hit points and deal 5 cold damage to any creature that hits us with a melee attack, with those numbers multiplying per spell slot used. Because we're going to be ending up using 5 full casters by the time this build is done, we'll actually have up to level 3 spell slots, and so Armour of Agathis will give us a decent little buff to our defenses, because again, we want survivability. Next up, Cantrips. Now, we're mainly going to be using Eldritch Blast as our cantrip of choice, so we might as well just pick up some utility options. Mage Armour, Mage Hand will allow us to basically just gamify some situations, interact with things in weird ways, might help you out some sticky situations. Minor Illusion can lure enemies away and allow you to kind of isolate a few. Firebolt might be a good source of alternate damage if force damage isn't going to work out for you, and Shocking Grasp as a melee option. As for our spells, obviously I want Shield. It's going to be one of the most powerful kind of spells we can get our hands on. Next up as well, you can kind of pick whatever utility spell you would like here. I actually think Disguise Self is going to come in really handy. Again, for those dialogue-based checks, you can gain basically different advantages based if you know kind of which race gets different dialogue options, so I really think this could help you out in a lot of sticky situations. Let's keep going. Now, weirdly enough, from this point on, the main core of the build is complete. You've got your Eldritch Blast, you've got your shield, you've got your Armour of Agathis, you kind of got all that sort of stuff you kind of need for kind of like the basic idea of what this build is trying to do, but we can continue to augment it further. Now, from this point on, the levels you kind of take don't matter as much. You mainly just wanted that level 3 core kit, but the strategy that I'm also going to be getting into with this build, I think, is going to want some certain levels to come first, but it's not necessary. I'm just going to double check my document to make sure I know exactly what I'm about to do. Okay, let's get into it. Our next level is going to be Fighter. This is going to get a second win, so we have a little bit of extra healing, but that's not a big deal. But we mainly want our fighting style to weapon fighting. This strategy does not use its bonus action very much. However, 2 weapon fighting would get us a lot of interesting things. Number 1, we can dual wield light weapons and use them to their full potential, which we will be doing, and also it would allow us to use dual hand crossbows as well if we so desire for another ranged bonus action attack that we can just kind of stack on top of our usual stuff. And because we're using the Gloves of Dexterity, we'll have 18 dex, so those will have a high chance to hit. Overall, I think this is going to work out quite nicely for us. I'll be sure there's going to be like multiple strategies that I'll be showing off for this build that you can do, but I'm just getting as much of a versatile kit as I can, and 2 weapon fighting is going to give us that. Next up, I want to grab a level of Cleric. What Cleric is going to do is it's going to give us a few interesting things, namely our subclass. I initially was considering War Domain because obviously the bonus action attacks would be nice, but we're dual wielding so we already get that. Instead, I want Tempest. Tempest is going to give us a few things, namely heavy armor proficiency, which we actually did not have up until this point. But we're also going to be getting Wrath of the Storm. Basically, now we have a unlimited reaction-based attack that allows us to do lightning or thunder damage as a retaliation, basically always allowing us to do a little bit of extra damage if we're within melee range, which we don't always want to be, but this build will be melee capable, so it will help. It's just a nice early level to grab, but it's also going to give us some really helpful cantrips in the form of Resistance, Guidance, and Thaumaturgy. I know Thaumaturgy overlaps with Friends a bit in considering its functionality, but again, if you're playing this on Tactician or Honor mode, Friends can cause people to turn hostile, where Thaumaturgy cannot. So there is use cases for both, and again, I want as much of that dialogue utility as we can grab. Our deity can be whatever you like, but since we are playing a Duergar, I'll go with Laduga. And as for our prepared spells, we can get a couple of really useful ones, like Sanctuary, allowing us to basically make ourselves unable to be hit so we can get things set up or escape from sticky situations. Also create or destroy water if you have someone in the party that can use lightning spells, like for example Gale as a wizard or sorcerer or what have you. This will really help out. Again, you have 3 other party members that are going to be built normally, so take advantage of that, especially in higher difficulty playthroughs. And finally, you can kind of take whatever you like here, it really doesn't matter. Shield of Faith could be useful, healing spells could be useful if you just feel like you're not really going to be using your spell slots for much else, so just being able to heal yourself in the party might be good. In fact, I'll take that, but it doesn't really matter. Just make sure you've got maybe the Sanctuary at the very least, I think is what you want. Next up, our next level is going to be in, well again, it doesn't really matter from this point, you kind of have everything, but I think Paladin would be a nice extra bit. Basically this is going to give us a bit more HP, because again martial fighters come with a bit more HP per level, but also we get to pick another subclass. Now I would say Oath of Vengeance is a really good one, just because it can give you and your allies a bit of extra radiant damage, and can daze enemies for a little bit. But the main thing what you could do here is you could actually go Oathbreaker. Now, Oath of Vengeance does fit in with the whole character theme I have here, but I think Oathbreaker could also work, because that would get you Spiteful Suffering, allowing you to mark a target for 3 turns, dealing extra necrotic damage and having advantage on all of your hits, which can be really strong. So, Vengeance or Oathbreaker probably lean more towards Oathbreaker mechanically, but it can definitely work out. So I would pick up Paladin at this level. Now, at this point, I'm mainly just filling out regular stats here. We're not really looking to get any more specific features, so I'm actually going to pick up a level of Barbarian here. Now, Barbarian is counterintuitive to a lot of what this build goes for. Obviously, Rage blocks our spells, so we can't really do that, but it is going to give us the biggest amount of HP in a single level, that being a whopping big amount, so we might as well pick it up at some point anyway, just to get that extra HP, and I think in the mid-game we are going to start taking more damage, so we're going to want more HP, and again, we're not deliberately looking for anything from the rest of these levels here, so we're just kind of picking up our big stats now. Speaking of stats, we can pick up another level of a martial here, just to kind of bump up our health as well. And I'm going to go with Monk, although I think Monk actually gets the same as everybody here. In fact, Ranger technically gets more, so let's grab that next. Again, these levels don't matter so much. Ranger is actually going to give us a ton of really good stuff, including Favored Enemy, which will allow us to pick up basically an extra proficiency and an extra spell. I don't think we need too many of like the features that we kind of get here. I would have gone Ranger Knight, but we actually already got Heavy Armour, so I'll go with Sanctified Stalker. That's going to give us Religion, Proficiency, and Sacred Flame, just another cantrip we can use. And Natural Explorer, I'm going to be picking up Wasteland Wanderer Poison, just to get that extra bit of damage. We'll have ways of getting the other resistances later, but you can kind of pick up whatever you like here. This is also going to give us an extra skill. We're going to be getting Perception anyway, but we can also choose another one, and I'm going to go with Insight. And then next up, I am going to be grabbing Monk here. Monk isn't really going to do much for us except give us a bit more HP, but we do get like Flurry of Blows, a bonus action on armed attack if we need it, the ability to use Dexterity for all weapons instead of just light weapons and finesse weapons, so if you decide you wanted to pick up a longsword for example, you could do that. Again, this build, since it uses Charisma, might benefit from Duke Ravengard's longsword, giving you a +2 to Charisma, and you would be able to use it with your Dexterity, and then make bonus action attacks using your unarmed strikes if you like, although that would be slightly weaker overall, a D4 compared to a D6. So it's entirely up to you, but we are going for an unarmored build here for the most part, so you would actually get a benefit out of the unarmored defense if is better than the, what do you call it, the Draconic Sorcerer feature. And you would also get a, yeah, well, you wouldn't get much, but we're here for the HP. And because we have to get Monk out of the way anyway. Now we've got 3 levels left to go, which means 3 different classes, and they are all spellcasting classes. Bard is going to give us some cantrips, but again, it's nothing that we're really going to be using over Eldritch Blast, so that's why I didn't prioritize it. If you wanted those spell slots for better Armour at Vagabus quite earlier on, you could have taken those instead. You could have taken like all the spellcasting levels instead, but it's entirely up to you. We can get some more utility spells from here, like Speak with Animals, Long Stride of Featherfall, and Heroism, Fairy Fire. It's entirely up to you. But like I said, these last sort of like the last sort of half of the leveling for this build is a lot more flexible, like I said. So pick up whatever you like, pick whatever instrument you like, and we also do get another skill proficiency here, but it really doesn't matter. At this point, we kind of had all of the main ones. Performance is fine. Next up at level 11, we have one of our final 2 spellcasting classes left, and I'm going to be going with Druid. Druid is just going to get us an extra cantrip, and Shillelagh is useless to us, so we'll grab Produce Flame and Thorn Whip, and we also do get to pick some extra spells, so I'll grab Enhance Sleep, Goodberry, and Healing Word. And then finally, our final level is going to go into Wizard, because it was the most useless class for us. Because we did level Intelligence, and so we'd only be getting 1 spell, so it's whatever. As for our cantrips, we can grab a couple more, but we kind of have everything we've ever needed in life, so just pick whatever. Spells, we get to choose 6 to have in our spell book, and the only one I can ever see being useful, because we've picked up all of the other, you know, what you call it, utility spells. I mean, there's 3, False Life, Expeditious Retreat, and Find Familiar. We already have Shield from Sorcerer, so we don't need to pick that up. We don't need Mage Armor, because we have many sources of an armored defense. So, it's really whatever. I would probably pick up Find Familiar, False Life, Expeditious Retreat, and then just fill the rest with whatever. It really doesn't matter. And I quite like having Find Familiar. And that is the build. As you can clearly see here, we have a lot of shit. Most of it, pretty much most of it we're not going to be using. We're mainly here for Eldritch Blast. But as I said already, we do have the Illithid powers, so I'll go over them quickly. You want all of them. As many as you can get your hands on, pretty much. There's, I would say, focus mainly on the ones that increase your damage. Psionic Overload, Luck of the Far Realms for the critical hits. In fact, I can actually show you in the spellbook, if I just quickly... Yeah, look at this spellbook, by the way. Look at all this. It doesn't even fit. But yeah, here we go. Here is all the stuff that you kind of get, and these are the ones I would recommend getting. Like, Repulsor would be really good for pushing targets away from you. Mind Blast would be a seriously strong one. What else do we have? I would say Force Tunnel would also be really good. Black Hole definitely works out some of these are the later ones, but the earlier ones you can pick up, like Psionic Overload. Luck of the Far Realms, Culver Weak would be really powerful as well. In fact, if we go over to the reactions, we can see even more. Where are they? There you go. Charm and Psionic. All 3 of these are really, really good. Charm, Psionic Backlash, Psionic Dominance. I would honestly just go through the game, grabbing every single tadpole that you can, and putting them all into your Illithid powers. I can't recommend specific orders, because they're all going to help you quite a lot. Check for description, I would say. I might have done a more detailed write-up down there, as I think you should always do with my builds, because I usually do little extra bits of information down in the description, so go check that out, as my thoughts are a bit all over the place as I'm recording, but trust me, you want as many Illithid powers as you can get, especially in Act 2 when you have to make the decision regarding your Illithid powers. Do it. Get as much as you can. It will, trust me, it's really going to help with your playthrough. Let's get into the equipment. Now, we have a wider range of things here, because I kind of wanted to show off a bit of progression. For Act 1, you're going to want to pick up a few things, namely some armor that you can use, and the Luminous Armor I think is a really good early game solid bet. It's a guaranteed thing that you can grab, it has a decent amount of armor class, the main ability that it gives us isn't really important, but because we have high dexterity, Our AC is going to be 18, which is going to be really solid for the early game. So this is kind of my recommended pickup for Act 1 as far as armor goes. Other Act 1 stuff that you want: the Gloves of Dexterity, as I already stated, to get our Dexterity to 18, the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, because it's going to help with arena hazards, as well as giving you Misty Step once per short rest, which can be seriously useful. The Parapact of Wound Closure, allowing you to stabilize whenever you are downed, which can be really helpful again in those high difficulty situations or campaigns, and also being able to always restore the maximum amount of hit points when you are healed. So if you drink a potion, get healed by a cleric, all of that stuff, you always recover the maximum amount, which is seriously going to help your survivability. As well as another Act 1 option is our main weapon, the Knife of the Undermountain King. Reduces the amount needed to roll a critical hit by 1, so we now roll a critical hit on a 19. And whenever we roll a 2 damage or less, we re-roll the dice, taking the highest result. All of this ability, this first ability here, applies to Eldritch Blast. Same with Shadow Blade as well, gain advantage on attack rolls against lightly or heavily obscure targets. All of this will apply to Eldritch Blast, making it a lot more powerful. As well as, since we're not going to be able to get our main ranged weapon until Act 2, we can pick up some hand crossbows, because you can get the Firestoker, which is a guaranteed drop, but you can also pick up a regular hand crossbow from vendors, and if you're lucky, a hand crossbow +1 might also pop up, giving you the dual wielding hand crossbow strategy, which will allow you to always use your bonus action to make an extra attack. I would also recommend picking up the Warped Headband of Intellect in Act 1 as well, giving you a solid headpiece that's going to bump up your intelligence for those dialogue-based checks, and just having it in your inventory so you can swap it out whenever you know you're going to need to make intelligence-based checks can be really helpful, so I would pick that up early on. And there are some ring options for Act 1 as well. The Ring of Arcane Synergy will allow you to, whenever you use Eldritch Blast, you can add your spellcasting ability modifier to the damage of your weapon attack that you make with your bonus action, because again, we're dual wielding, whether that's with your crossbows or your melee weapons. Absolutely want this. And you can also pick up the Ring of Protection as well if you want to do that questline, which might piss off the Druid, so be a bit careful, but this would give you a +1 bonus to your armor class and saving throws, which would be very nice to have. The rest of the stuff you can kind of grab. Like, most of the stuff that I've mentioned here that you can grab in Act 1 is the stuff you want to go for. There's not really anything else. So Act 2 gear is where we're going to move on to now. In Act 2, you have an option. You can either go for the Darkfire Shortbow to give yourself resistance to fire and cold damage and haste, allowing you to basically just spam Eldritch Blast as much as you like. This could really work out in your favor if you decide to go with this. But I would personally, for this build, have an ally that can cast haste on you instead, because this build is going to be quite bad at saving throws, meaning you're going to drop concentration quite a bit. So I would have a member of the party who can maintain that concentration a bit better than you cast haste on you, and I would keep, as a result, the dual crossbow situation in which you would use the Near Misser in your main hand, and the Hellfire hand crossbow in your offhand, because that is the more powerful one, and you're more likely going to be using your bonus action to fire these, so you want the more powerful one in the offhand. Basically, you know these crossbows already. They let you cast Magic Missile and Scorching Ray respectively, and are just very good overall, so you definitely want to have these in your kit. But you can go with the Darkfire Shortbow if you want to be more self-sufficient. It's what I went with in the combat footage, just to show off what haste does for this build and why it's actually quite important. The rest of the important stuff you can pick up in Act 2 is as follows: the Potent Robe. This allows our cantrips to deal additional damage equal to our Charisma modifier. It's not Agonizing Blast, but it does do the same thing. Normally, most builds would stack this with Agonizing Blast to do, well, a lot of damage, but we don't have Agonizing Blast here, so this is the next best thing. This is going to make our Eldritch Blast a lot more powerful, so it's something we absolutely want to pick up. We're also going to get temporary hit points equal to our Charisma modifier at the start of each turn, so if our Armour of Agathis runs out, we still are able to stack temp HP afterwards, and it's a +1 to armor class overall, giving us a decent AC of 19 when all is said and done, which is great. We can also pick up the Cloak of Protection here, giving us a +1 armor to our armor class and saving throws as well in Act 2. And we also get 2 more pieces of equipment that are going to be seriously good for this build. The Risky Ring. You gain advantage on all attack rolls, including Eldritch Blast, which is going to really allow us to fish for those crits, but we receive disadvantage on all saving throws. This is where that inability to maintain our own concentration comes in. Since we're going to have disadvantage on all saving throws, it's going to make it a lot trickier to maintain haste on ourselves, which is why I recommend you have another party member to do so. However, because we're going to be playing a mostly ranged character that has the ability to go like invisible and do all sorts of other things to kind of help stop them from getting hit, it's not going to matter as much. The saving throws on wisdom and other spell effects might be a bit problematic, but again, if you decide to play a gnome instead of a Duergar here, you can actually counteract that a little bit, because the advantage gained from, the gnome feature will cancel out the disadvantage from the risky ring, making it neutral, so you just have regular saving throws. Or in Act 3, you could pick up something like the Fey Semblance Amulet, which I haven't gotten in my inventory here, but it does the same thing as the Gnome feature, which it just gives you advantage on Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma saving throws, allowing you to negate that as well, even if you're not playing a Gnome. But that's an Act 3 option, so it's not going to come up for a while. That's why I chose the Periapt as our main thing, because it is going to be obtained quite early and be very useful in the long run. But the risky ring is going to be really great for this strategy, just having constant advantage. As well, we can also grab the Killer's Sweetheart. Whenever you kill a creature, your next attack roll will be a critical hit. Now, I've said this a bunch of times, but it doesn't mean that your next attack roll is guaranteed to be a critical hit. This is a thing that you can bank and then spend when you like. So you don't have to use it right away, so you can choose a moment to get a guaranteed critical hit, which is insane. We also do get our other melee weapon in Act 2, the Justicia's Scimitar. If you attack with advantage, which we will always be doing, you have a chance of blinding your target. This is extremely strong. This basically is going to allow us to really debilitate our enemies pretty much all the time, giving them disadvantage on attack rolls, and the range of their attacks and spells are reduced to 3 meters, and we, again, will gain advantage against them anyway. And that will give our entire party advantage to hit, which is awesome. The Justicia's Scimitar also comes with a unique attack called Shadow Soaked Blow. This deals extra psychic damage whenever we strike an enemy. We can add our proficiency bonus to the damage, and moreover, if it hits, it deals an additional 1d6 of psychic damage, and it doesn't break concealment, which we don't really care about with this build. So overall, a very powerful strategy, and I would honestly say that these two weapons are going to be our weapons for the rest of the campaign. We don't actually need a lot of equipment from Act 3, but let's move on to it anyway. As for stuff we get from Act 3, there's a couple of options. There's also an Act 2 option I've just realised I forgot to mention, which is the Dark Justicia helmet, which would allow you to reduce, will allow you to reduce the number you need to roll a critical hit while attacking by 1 again, essentially allowing you to roll a critical hit on an 18 if this is combined with the Knife of the Undermountain King, as long as you are obscured. So not all the time, but it could definitely help out. But once you're in Act 3, you have 2 options. We have the Birthright Hat, which would bump up our charisma, making our Eldritch Blast even more powerful. This would probably be my pick, but you could also go for the Helm of Baldur, giving you an extra bit of armor class, a bit of healing. You cannot be stunned or have critical hits land against you. Could be very useful, but I would honestly probably put this on the melee fighter that you would already have in your party, but I just thought I'd mention it as an option. Overall, you have a lot of options here. Ignore the armor here and the rings here. These were from an earlier version of the build that didn't use Eldritch Blast, which didn't end up making the cut because it sucked. So, but this, if you wanted to pick it up, would give you a +2 to Constitution, which could be nice. And these ones were for other cantrips, it doesn't really matter. So yeah, overall, that is the build. In a nutshell, what you're trying to do with this is use your Illithid powers to give yourself a bit of an edge. Getting a guaranteed crit with Luck of the Far Realms is nice. Adding extra damage to all your attacks with Psionic Overload can be really powerful. Just generally messing with your opponents using things like Force Tunnel, Repulsor, Black Hole, Concentrated Blast if you do have a concentration spell in the works, Mind Blast, Flight, the Displacer Beast form if you need a last minute kind of transformation, Charm, Psionic Backlash, Psionic Dominance. All of those are what you're going to be focusing on, while your main strategy with your actual leveling up with your classes is going to be Eldritch Blast spam, getting as many crits as you can between the advantage and the crit threshold reduction that the Knife of the Undermountain King gets us, and then being able to make bonus action attacks with either our melee weapon or our crossbows, it's depending on what range we're at, and then just, you know, being able to keep ourselves alive by being able to dodge things with spells like Shield, keeping ourselves at high HP with the Periapt and our high Constitution, all of that good stuff. And like I said, if you want to grab haste either from the Darkfire Shortbow or a companion, you're just going to be extremely powerful. I mean, you'll see in the combat footage, despite this build really being quite weak, Eldritch Blast is just such a strong thing that it makes up for the damage. And again, I feel like getting most of your power from your Warlock level and the Illithid powers with the Great Old One, I mean, it just feels like you're really playing into an interesting character that truly does everything they can to obtain power, no matter the cost to themselves, and the fact that they tried to get power from so many different sources led them to being weaker than the sum of their parts, basically. You'll see, like, when you play this build, the level progression is gonna feel pretty good, I think. Again, getting those skill proficiencies, Shield and Eldritch Blast really early on, is basically gonna set you up for the playstyle for the rest of the campaign, and then getting those Fighter, Cleric, and Paladin levels just allowing you to kind of, well, not the Paladin levels so much, but the Fighter and Cleric levels basically just giving you access to all the different armor and weapons in the game and allowing you to dual wield and do all that good stuff. It's gonna help out. I think you're gonna find that this build is gonna be quite satisfactory in the long run. I do think this build will be able to complete this this achievement on Tactician. Honor mode might be a stretch, but I do think it would be possible if you used your other party members correctly, and obviously if you play balanced. Yeah, this build will absolutely shred. You'll have no issues. Again, telling you to focus on the Illithid powers as part of this build, I mean, it is kind of cheap, but I do feel like having that consistent element that you can always work off of, despite no matter what strategy you go with, is really going to help, and I feel like it ties everything together quite nicely in the long run. So yeah, I mean, not much else to go over. I mean, I'm recording this on a Wednesday morning, so that build hasn't gone up yet. Still interested in seeing the fallout of that. As for other channel stuff, I mean, we did just hit 6,000 subscribers, which is awesome. Nice milestone to hit. We're now 4,000 away from 10k, which I think is kind of the final goal that I'm aiming for now. This weekend, though I will not be streaming, I've made a community post about it already, but I will be joining Red Dog, who I've streamed with in the past, on her Twitch stream on Saturday because it's her birthday. She invited me to that stream initially, and then I ended up joining a couple of streams beforehand anyway, but that was kind of the main deal, so I'm going to be showing up for that, and I highly encourage all of you to go over there, check out the community tab for more information. Anything else that I want to discuss? No, not really. I'll probably be back with another live stream, obviously not this weekend, but the next weekend after that. And since I already have quite a few deity builds lined up, we might not do a deity build stream, we might just do a different type of stream, maybe just a regular build making stream, or maybe I'll just play a game or something. We'll see. But yeah, I'm going to leave things here. I'll leave you with the combat footage. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.
Seems simple enough.